Find your place of rest. Let your breath slow, your muscles soften, your thoughts begin to quiet. Tonight we journey to Japan in the year 1750, during the Edo period, to a small village in the countryside where rice has been grown for centuries, where the seasons turn as they always have, where life follows the ancient rhythm of planting and harvest. There will be no drama here, no samurai, no battles, no political intrigue, just the quiet, patient work of a farmer named Takeshi, whose life revolves around rice, planting it, tending it, harvesting it, year after year, following the path his father walked and his father before him. This is a life of seasons, of waiting, of small daily tasks repeated endlessly, of watching and listening to the land. So settle yourself now, close your eyes if you wish, and let us begin in early spring, when the rice seeds are first prepared, and the cycle begins once more. The mountains still hold snow, but in the village, spring is beginning. The plum blossoms have opened, pale pink against grey branches, the first sign that the cold season is ending. Soon it will be time to plant rice, but first, there is preparation. Takeshi is 45 years old, a farmer like his father and grandfather before him. He owns a small plot of land, about 1 hectare, which produces enough rice to feed his family and pay the taxes required by the domain lord. His family consists of his wife Yuki, his mother, and his 2 sons, 15 and 12. His daughter married and moved to her husband's village 2 years ago. The house where Takeshi lives is typical of the region. A thatched roof, walls of wood and bamboo, a packed earth floor in the work area, and raised wooden floors in the living spaces. The house is small but well maintained. Everything has its place, nothing is wasted. On this spring morning, Takeshi rises before dawn. This is his custom throughout most of the year. The work of a rice farmer does not allow for sleeping late. He dresses in his work clothes, a short jacket and loose trousers made of rough cotton, both dyed with indigo to a dark blue that has faded over many washings. On his feet, simple straw sandals. He steps outside into the cool morning air. The sky is beginning to lighten in the east, though the sun has not yet risen. He walks to the small shrine at the edge of the village, a simple wooden structure dedicated to the rice deity Inari. Here, he claps his hands twice, bows, and offers a brief prayer for a good harvest. This is the beginning of the rice-growing season, and it is important to show respect to the spirits who watch over the fields. From the shrine, he walks to the seed storage shed. This small building, raised on stone pillars to keep it dry and protect from rodents, holds the seed rice that was saved from last year's harvest. Takeshi selected this seed carefully, choosing the best grains from the healthiest plants. Good seed means a good crop. Poor seed means poor yield. Every farmer knows this. He opens the wooden door and removes several small bags of seed rice. These seeds have been kept dry and cool through the winter. Now they must be prepared for planting. The preparation process will take several days and requires careful attention. First, the seeds must be soaked in water. Takeshi carries the bags to his house, where Yuki has prepared several large ceramic tubs filled with water. He empties the seed rice into the tubs, spreading it evenly. The grains float at first, then gradually absorb water and sink. They will soak for 3 days, which allows them to begin the germination process. During these 3 days, Takeshi changes the water twice daily, morning and evening. This keeps the water fresh and prevents the seeds from developing mold or rot. The task is simple, but important. He scoops out the old water with a wooden bucket and adds fresh water from the well. While the seeds soak, Takeshi prepares the seed beds. These are small, protected plots of land separate from the main rice fields. The seed beds are where the rice seedlings will grow before being transplanted to the larger fields. The location of the seed beds is important. They must be sheltered from strong winds, close to a water source, and receive good sunlight. Takeshi's seed beds are behind his house, in a spot his father used and his grandfather before that. The soil here is rich, carefully maintained over generations. He begins by clearing the beds of any weeds or debris left from winter. Then he turns the soil with his hoe, breaking up any clumps, mixing air into the earth. The turning of the soil is rhythmic work. Lift the hoe, bring it down, pull it back, lift again. Takeshi's body knows these motions from decades of practice. His mind is quiet as he works, focused on the task but not thinking about it consciously. This is meditative labor, the kind that occupies the hands and leaves the mind at peace. After turning the soil, he adds organic matter, composted rice straw, and night soil from the village. This enriches the soil, providing nutrients for the young seedlings. He mixes the amendments in carefully, ensuring even distribution. Then, he rakes the soil smooth and uses a wooden board to level it precisely. The surface must be flat so that when the beds are flooded with shallow water, the depth will be consistent across the entire area. Finally, he creates low earthen walls around the perimeter of each bed. These walls, about 10 centimeters high, will hold water once the beds are flooded. He packs the earth firmly with his hands, ensuring there are no gaps where water could leak out. This work takes 2 days. At the end of each day, Takeshi's back aches and his hands are rough with dried mud, but the work is satisfying. The seed beds are ready. Soon the soaked seeds will be planted here, and the cycle will truly begin. After 3 days of soaking, the rice seeds have begun to sprout. Tiny white shoots emerge from the grains, barely visible but present. The seeds are ready to be planted in the prepared beds. Takeshi drains the water from the tubs and spreads the sprouted seeds on a woven bamboo mat to dry slightly. They should be moist but not dripping wet. Then he carries them to the seed beds in shallow baskets. The planting of the seed beds is traditionally done with the entire family helping. Yuki and the 2 sons join Takeshi, and even his elderly mother, though her back is no longer strong enough for heavy work, sits nearby and offers encouragement. Before planting, the seed beds must be flooded with a shallow layer of water, just a few centimeters deep. Takeshi opens the small sluice gate that connects his beds to the irrigation channel, and water flows in from the nearby stream. He watches carefully, adjusting the gate to control the flow. When the water reaches the correct depth, he closes the gate. Now the planting begins. The family works together, moving slowly across the beds. They broadcast the sprouted seeds by hand, scattering them evenly across the water's surface. The seeds sink to the muddy bottom, where they will take root. The motion of broadcasting is gentle, a smooth sweep of the arm, releasing seeds in an arc, ensuring even distribution. This work requires patience and attention. Too many seeds in one area, and the seedlings will compete with each other, growing weak. Too few and the bed is underutilized. Takeshi and his family have done this many times, and their hands know the right amount to scatter, the right arc of motion. The work takes most of the morning. When it is finished, the seed beds are covered with a thin, even layer of sprouted rice seeds. Now they must be protected and tended until the seedlings are ready to transplant, which will be in about 35 days. The protection comes first. Birds love rice seeds, and if the beds are left unguarded, the birds will eat much of the planting. Takeshi and his sons erect a simple scarecrow and hang strips of cloth that flutter in the wind. They also take turns watching the beds during the day, particularly in the early morning and evening when birds are most active. The youngest son, being 12, is given this job. He sits near the beds with a wooden clapper, making noise whenever birds approach. The tending involves maintaining the water level. Too much water, and the seeds will rot. Too little, and they will dry out. Takeshi checks the beds twice daily, adding water from the irrigation channel when needed, draining excess water when there is too much. This balance is crucial. He also watches for pests and disease. Rice seedlings are vulnerable to many problems: insects, fungal infections, too much sun, too little sunday. A good farmer observes carefully and responds quickly to any issues. Takeshi examines the beds closely, looking at the water's color, checking for unusual smells, noting the appearance of the young shoots as they emerge. Within a week, the seeds have sent down roots into the mud and sent up shoots through the water. The beds become carpeted with green thousands of tiny rice plants, each just a few centimeters tall, growing closely together. The sight is pleasing. This green is the color of new life, of successful germination, of the promise of harvest to come. Takeshi continues his daily routine. Check the water morning and evening, watch for problems, make small adjustments. The work is not difficult, but it requires regularity and attention. He cannot neglect the seed beds, not even for a day. While the seedlings grow in the beds, Takeshi also prepares the main rice fields. These larger paddies will eventually receive the transplanted seedlings, but first they must be made ready. This is heavy work, and it begins with ploughing. The main rice fields are about 500 meters from Takeshi's house, down a path through the village and past several other farmsteads. The fields have been used for rice cultivation for generations, perhaps for centuries. The boundaries between fields are marked by low earthen bunds, carefully maintained, dividing the land into a patchwork of rectangular paddies. Takeshi's fields consist of 3 connected paddies, each about 30 meters by 10 meters. Together they form his hectare of rice land. The fields are currently dry, showing only the stubble from last year's harvest and various winter weeds that have grown since then. The preparation of the fields begins with ploughing. Takeshi uses a simple wooden plough pulled by the village ox. The ox belongs to several families jointly, and its use is shared according to a schedule. Today is Takeshi's turn. He rises early and walks to the house where the ox is kept. The animal is large, brown, with curved horns and a placid temperament. Takeshi greets the ox with a pat on its muscled shoulder, then leads it to his fields, walking slowly, letting the animal set the pace. At the field, Takeshi attaches the plough to the ox's yoke. The plough is a simple design, a wooden blade that cuts into the soil, attached to a long handle that Takeshi grips for control. He guides the ox in straight lines across the field, turning the soil, burying the stubble and weeds, breaking up the compacted earth. This work is physically demanding. The ox does most of the pulling, but Takeshi must control the depth and direction of the plough, keeping the furrows straight and even. His hands grip the wooden handle firmly. His legs brace against the resistance. His body leans forward, working with the ox, not against it. The ploughing takes 2 full days, working from dawn until the afternoon heat becomes too intense. At midday, Takeshi stops to rest and to let the ox rest. He sits in the shade of a persimmon tree at the field's edge, eating the rice balls Yuki packed for him that morning. The ox grazes on grass nearby, still yoked but allowed to rest. After ploughing, the field must be flooded and harrowed. Flooding comes first. Takeshi opens the main irrigation gate, and water from the mountain stream flows into his fields through a network of channels. The water fills the paddies slowly, transforming the dry soil into mud. He adjusts the flow carefully, ensuring each paddy receives adequate water, that none is flooded too deeply or too shallowly. When the water is right about 10 centimeters deep, he begins harrowing. This involves walking through the muddy field, dragging a wooden rake or harrow behind him, breaking up the large clumps of soil left by the plough, mixing the water and soil into a smooth, even mud. The ox can be used for this too, but Takeshi often does it by hand, wading through the knee-deep water and mud, feeling the texture with his feet and legs, ensuring the consistency is correct. Harrowing is exhausting work. Each step through the thick mud requires effort. The muscles in his legs burn. The sun beats down. But the work must be done properly. The mud must be smooth and level, without large clumps or deep holes, so that when the seedlings are transplanted, they will all be at the same depth, all have equal access to water and nutrients. It takes another full day to harrow all 3 paddies. By the end, Takeshi is covered in mud up to his thighs, his arms are splattered, his face streaked with sweat and dirt. But the fields are ready. They sit full of water and smooth mud, waiting for the seedlings. Now comes a period of waiting. The seedlings in the seed beds need another 2 weeks to grow large enough for transplanting. During this time, Takeshi maintains both the seed beds and the main fields, checking water levels, making small repairs to the bunds, watching for problems. This is a quieter time, a pause between the intense labor of preparation and the intense labor of transplanting. Takeshi uses these days to repair tools, mend fences, tend to his small vegetable garden, and help his neighbors with their work, knowing they will help him in return when transplanting time comes. The village operates on reciprocal labor. When one family needs help with a major task, others come to assist, and the favor is returned later. This is how rural communities function, through mutual support and shared work. No one farms truly alone. After 35 days, the seedlings in the seed beds are ready for transplanting. They have grown to about 20 centimeters tall, with several leaves each and strong root systems. The time for transplanting has arrived, and this is one of the most labor-intensive periods of the rice farming year. Transplanting cannot be done by one person or even one family. It requires many hands working together. Takeshi has arranged for a work party, several neighboring families who will help him transplant his fields, and in return, he will help them with theirs in the coming days. On the morning of transplanting, about 15 people gather at Takeshi's house. There are men, women, and older children. Everyone knows what to do. This is a familiar task, performed every year, part of the rhythm of village life. First, the seedlings must be pulled from the seed beds. Workers wade into the muddy beds and gently pull up handfuls of seedlings, being careful not to damage the delicate roots. The seedlings come up with mud clinging to their roots. They are bundled into small sheaves and placed in baskets. Yuki and the other women carry the baskets of seedlings to the main fields, where the transplanting will take place. The fields are ready, filled with water and smooth mud, waiting. The actual transplanting is done in a line. The workers spread out across the width of the field, about an arm's length apart from each other. They work backward, moving across the field in a coordinated line, each person planting seedlings as they go. The motion is simple but requires practice to do efficiently. Take a small bundle of 3 or 4 seedlings from the basket. Separate them slightly. Push them into the mud to a depth where they will stand upright but not be buried. The spacing is important. Seedlings should be about 15 centimeters apart in all directions. Too close and they compete. Too far and the field is underutilized. Takeshi, being the field's owner, does not plant but instead oversees the work, walking along the edges of the field, checking that the spacing is correct, that the seedlings are planted at the proper depth, that the line of workers is moving at an even pace. The work is monotonous and physically demanding. The workers are bent over for hours, their backs aching, their hands constantly pushing seedlings into mud, their feet and legs submerged in the water. But there is also a social element. The workers talk and joke as they transplant, sharing gossip, telling stories, singing traditional work songs that help maintain the rhythm of planting. One popular song goes, "Plant the seedlings, one by one, under the summer sun. By autumn they'll be tall, golden grain for all." The melody is simple and repetitive, easy to sing while working, and it helps the line of planters stay coordinated. Takeshi's 3 paddies take about 6 hours to transplant, with 15 people working. When the work is finished, the fields are transformed. Where there was empty mud and water, there are now thousands of small green seedlings, planted in even rows, filling the entire field with the promise of rice. Yuki prepares a meal for all the workers. Rice with vegetables, miso soup, pickles. Everyone sits together in the shade, eating and resting, satisfied with the morning's work accomplished. Tomorrow, Takeshi and some of his family will go to another neighbor's field to help with their transplanting. The cycle of reciprocal labor continues. After transplanting comes another critical period. The seedlings must establish themselves in the main field. This takes about 2 weeks. During this time, some seedlings will die. It is inevitable. But most will take root and begin growing. Takeshi walks through his fields daily, noting which seedlings look healthy, which look weak, replacing any that have clearly died with spare seedlings from the seed beds. He also adjusts water levels carefully during this period. The seedlings need consistent shallow water, enough to keep their roots submerged, but not so much that they are drowned. And he begins the endless task of weeding. Summer arrives, and with it, the rice enters its main growing phase. The seedlings, now established in the main fields, begin to grow rapidly. Each day brings visible change. The plants grow taller, develop more leaves, tiller out into multiple stems from each original seedling. The fields become increasingly green and lush. But this is also the period of greatest labor for the farmer. The rice must be tended constantly. There are 3 main tasks: maintaining water levels, weeding, and controlling pests. The water level in a rice paddy must be carefully managed. Too shallow, and the rice will not grow well. The soil will dry and crack. Too deep, and the rice may drown or develop weak stems. The ideal depth changes as the rice grows. Early in summer, the water should be shallow, about 5 centimeters. As the rice grows taller, the water can be deeper, up to 15 centimeters. But water management is complicated by weather. If it rains heavily, the paddies may flood with too much water. If there is drought, the water level drops. Takeshi must respond to these changes constantly. After heavy rain, he opens the drainage gates to let excess water flow out. During dry periods, he ensures the irrigation channels are bringing in enough water from the stream. This requires daily attention. Every morning and evening, Takeshi walks his fields, checking the water, making adjustments. The walk itself takes about 30 minutes, and the adjustments may take another 30 minutes or more if significant changes are needed. This is time that must be spent, every day, without fail. Weeding is perhaps the most tedious task. Rice paddies, with their warm water and rich soil, are ideal growing conditions not just for rice but for many other plants. Weeds compete with rice for nutrients, sunlight, and space. If left unchecked, weeds can significantly reduce the rice harvest. Takeshi weeds his fields by hand, wading through the water, bending down to pull weeds by their roots. The mud releases them with a sucking sound. He tosses the pulled weeds onto the bunds between fields, where they will dry out and die. Later, they can be composted and returned to the soil. The weeding must be done multiple times throughout the summer. Weeds grow back, new weeds sprout. It is an endless battle. Takeshi typically weeds each field once every 2 weeks, working through the paddies systematically. Each weeding session takes most of a day. His sons help with this task. The whole family, except for his elderly mother, spends many summer days in the fields, bent over, pulling weeds, moving slowly through the water. It is hard, monotonous work, but it must be done. There is no alternative. Pest control is another concern. Rice fields attract many insects. Some, like dragonflies, are harmless or even beneficial, eating mosquitoes and other pests, but others damage the rice. Rice stem borers, for example, bore into the rice stems, weakening the plant. Leafhoppers suck sap from the leaves. There are many threats. In the Edo period, farmers have limited tools for pest control. They cannot use modern pesticides. Instead, they rely on observation and manual removal. Takeshi walks his fields regularly, examining the plants, looking for signs of insect damage. When he finds infested plants, he removes them and burns them, preventing the pest from spreading. He also encourages natural predators. Frogs and birds eat many insects. The water in the paddies attracts frogs, and Takeshi does not disturb them. He even places a few stones in the water to give frogs places to rest. The birds, too, are allowed to forage in the fields, though he must balance this against their tendency to also eat rice. Through these summer months, Takeshi's life revolves entirely around the rice fields. He wakes before dawn, eats a simple breakfast, and goes to the fields. He works until the afternoon. Heat becomes too intense, then rests in the shade during the hottest part of the day. In the late afternoon, he returns to work until dusk. Then home, a simple dinner, and sleep. The next day, the cycle repeats. It is not a life of variety or excitement. Each day is much like the one before. But there is a satisfaction in watching the rice grow, in seeing the results of his labor. The plants that were tiny seedlings in spring are now knee-high and growing taller each week. By midsummer, they are waist-high. The fields have become a sea of green, rippling in the wind. On rare occasions, Takeshi takes a brief rest to simply sit at the edge of his field and observe. The rice plants sway gently. Dragonflies dart over the water's surface. Frogs call from the shallows. White egrets wade through the paddies, hunting for small fish and insects. These moments of quiet observation are brief, but they feed something in Takeshi's spirit. This connection to the land, to the cycle of growth, is part of why he continues, year after year. By late summer, the rice plants have reached their full height, typically about 90 centimeters tall. The vegetative growth phase is complete. Now the plants enter their reproductive phase. Small flowers appear at the top of each stem, organized into panicles, the branching structures that will eventually hold the rice grains. The flowering period is brief but critical. The tiny rice flowers, barely visible, open for only a few hours. During this time, pollination occurs. Rice is primarily self-pollinating, meaning each flower pollinates itself, but wind also carries pollen between plants. After pollination, the flowers close and the grain begins to form. Takeshi watches this process carefully. Flowering is a sign that the harvest is approaching, that the long months of tending are nearing their culmination. It is also a time of some anxiety. The developing grains are vulnerable. A heavy storm could knock down the plants before the grain is fully formed. A period of excessive heat or cold could damage the developing seeds. Disease could strike. There is less to do during this period. The water level is maintained, but weeding becomes less critical. The rice plants are now large enough that they shade out most weeds. Pest control continues, but the plants are more robust than they were earlier in the season. Takeshi's main job now is to watch and wait. He checks his fields regularly, walking through the paddies, examining the developing panicles. He can see the tiny grains forming, green at first, gradually swelling as they fill with starch. This is the rice grain itself, the seed, the food that will sustain his family through the coming year. The fields at this stage are beautiful. The rice plants, now fully mature, form a dense canopy of green. When wind blows across the fields, the entire surface moves in waves, like water. The effect is mesmerizing, peaceful. Many poets have written about rice fields in late summer, and Takeshi, though not educated in poetry, appreciates the beauty in his own way. As the grains develop, the panicles become heavy, causing the stems to bend slightly under the weight. This is a good sign. Heavy panicles mean abundant grain, a good harvest. Takeshi can estimate the yield by looking at how the plants bend, how full the panicles appear. This year looks promising. The plants are healthy, the panicles are full, and so far there have been no disasters. The water management changes during this period. As the grain matures, the fields must be gradually drained. Too much water during grain maturation can cause the rice to lodge, fall over, or develop diseases. Takeshi opens his drainage gates slightly, allowing the water level to drop slowly over several weeks. By the time harvest approaches, the fields will be dry, or nearly dry, allowing easier access for cutting the rice. This draining is a delicate process. Drain too quickly and the plants suffer stress. Drain too slowly and the grain does not mature properly. Takeshi adjusts the gates daily, monitoring the water level, finding the right balance. He also begins to prepare for harvest. Tools must be checked and repaired. Sickles need sharpening. Baskets need mending. The threshing area near his house must be swept clean and prepared. There is much to do to get ready for the intense work that harvest will bring. But for now, in these late summer days, there is still mostly waiting. The rice is doing its work, converting sunlight and water and soil nutrients into grain. Takeshi's job is to provide the best conditions possible and not interfere unnecessarily. Sometimes farming is about action, but sometimes it is about patience. Autumn arrives, and with it, harvest time. The rice has matured. The grains, once green, have turned golden yellow. The panicles hang heavy. The fields, instead of lush green, are now a sea of gold. It is time to bring in the harvest. Takeshi has been preparing for this moment all year. In a sense, everything he has done since spring planting, transplanting, weeding, tending, has been leading to these few crucial weeks. The harvest must be completed quickly, before the rice becomes overripe, and grains begin to shatter and fall to the ground, before storms arrive, before birds eat too much. Harvest, like transplanting, requires many hands. Takeshi again calls on his neighbors, and they arrive early one morning, ready for work. The harvest party is similar to the transplanting party, multiple families working together, knowing they will help each other in turn. The harvest method is traditional and hand labor intensive. Workers enter the dry or nearly dry fields carrying sickles. They bend down, grasp a handful of rice stems near the base, cut them with the sickle, and lay the cut rice on the ground in neat rows. The cut stalks, with their grain-bearing panicles, will later be gathered and moved to the threshing area. Cutting rice is hard work. The workers are bent over constantly, cutting handful after handful. The rice stems are tough and fibrous. The sickles must be sharp. Each handful represents several plants, and a single paddy contains thousands of plants. The cutting takes hours. But again, there is a social element. The workers talk as they cut, encouraging each other, sharing news. and they sing different songs than the planting songs, but still traditional, rhythmic melodies that pace the work and lift spirits. Takeshi's 3 paddies take about 2 days to harvest completely. When the cutting is finished, the fields are stubbled, the golden rice lying in neat rows waiting to be gathered. The gathering happens next. Workers bundle the cut rice into sheaves, tying them with twisted rice straw. These sheaves are then carried to the drying area. The drying area is a cleared space near Takeshi's house, where wooden racks have been erected. The sheaves of rice are hung on these racks, suspended upside down so that any remaining moisture can drain and the grain can dry in the sun and air. This drying period lasts about 2 weeks. During this time, Takeshi guards the drying rice carefully. Birds are attracted to the grain, and sparrows in particular can consume a significant amount if given the opportunity. He and his sons take turns watching the racks, making noise to scare birds away. The weather during drying is also a concern. Rain would ruin the drying rice, causing it to mold. Takeshi watches the sky constantly, and if rain threatens, the sheaves must be quickly moved under cover. Fortunately, early autumn in this region is usually dry, but one can never be completely certain. After 2 weeks of drying, the rice is ready for threshing. Threshing separates the grain from the straw. In the Edo period, this is done by hand using various methods. Takeshi uses a threshing board, a wooden board with bamboo teeth. He holds a sheaf of rice and strikes the grain-bearing panicles against the teeth, knocking the grains loose. The grains fall onto a mat spread below, while the straw is set aside. Threshing is tedious, repetitive work. Strike, 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 move to the next sheaf. Hours pass. The pile of threshed grain grows. The pile of rice straw grows. Takeshi and his family work together, everyone taking turns threshing. The threshed grain still contains chaff, the thin husk surrounding each grain. This must be removed through winnowing. Takeshi pours the grain into a large, shallow basket and tosses it into the air. The wind carries away the light chaff, while the heavier grain falls back into the basket. This is the same winnowing technique used for wheat and other grains, and it is effective. After winnowing, the rice must be hulled to remove the hard outer hull and produce white rice. This is done with a wooden mortar and pestle. The grain is placed in the mortar, and the pestle, a heavy wooden pole, is lifted and dropped repeatedly, pounding the grain, loosening the hulls. Then the grain is winnowed again to remove the loosened hulls. The process is repeated until the rice is clean. Hulling is extremely labor-intensive. It takes hours of pounding to process even a small amount of rice. This is work often done by women and children, while the men focus on other tasks. Yuki and the boys take turns pounding rice, their arms growing tired but the work continuing. Finally, after cutting, drying, threshing, winnowing, and hulling, the rice is ready for storage. Takeshi measures it carefully. This year's harvest is good. About 4,000 kilograms of hulled rice from his 1 hectare of land. This is a solid yield. But not all of this rice belongs to Takeshi. A significant portion must be paid as tax to the domain lord. In his region, the tax rate is about 40% of the harvest. Takeshi sets aside 1,600 kilograms for tax, which will be collected by the domain officials in the coming weeks. The remaining rice, about 2,400 kilograms, is his to keep. Some of this will be sold to buy other necessities, clothing, tools, salt, and other items that cannot be produced on the farm. Some will be kept as seed for next year's planting. The majority will be stored to feed his family through the coming year. Takeshi feels satisfaction looking at the full sacks of rice. This is the fruit of a year's labor. This is security. This is survival. And there is also relief. The harvest is complete. The year's main work is done. He can rest now, at least for a while, before the cycle begins again. With the harvest complete and the tax rice set aside, life in the village enters a quieter period. The urgency of summer is over. The rice fields are stubbled and empty. The nights are growing cooler. Autumn is deepening, and winter approaches. But even though the harvest is done, there is still work. The rice straw saved from threshing has many uses. Takeshi and his family spend autumn days processing this straw, transforming it into useful items. Some straw is twisted into rope, which is needed for countless purposes: tying tools, repairing the house, making new sandals. Yuki is skilled at rope making, sitting on the floor with piles of straw around her, twisting the fibers into strong, even rope. Her hands move automatically, the motion practiced over decades. Some straw is woven into mats for flooring or into baskets for storage. Takeshi's mother, despite her age, is still excellent at weaving. She sits in the sunshine, her weathered fingers working the straw into tight, neat patterns. These mats and baskets will last for years with proper care. Some straw is set aside for next year's transplanting, when it will be used to tie sheaves of seedlings. And a significant amount is composted, mixed with other organic waste, and left to decompose over the winter. In spring, this compost will be spread on the fields, enriching the soil for the next planting. Nothing is wasted. Every part of the rice plant has value. The grain is food, the straw is material. Even the hulls removed during processing are useful. They can be burned for ash, which is used in various ways, or mixed into animal feed. Autumn is also the time for repair and maintenance. Tools that were heavily used during planting, tending and harvest are now cleaned, repaired and stored properly. Takeshi sharpens sickles and hoes, replaces broken handles, oils any metal parts to prevent rust. The house itself receives attention. The thatched roof, if it shows any damage or wear, is repaired. Walls are checked for gaps that might let in winter cold. The vegetable garden is prepared for winter crops. And there are community obligations. The village shrine requires maintenance, and all families contribute labor. The irrigation channels must be cleaned and repaired before winter, ensuring they will function properly when spring comes. These are collective responsibilities, and Takeshi participates along with his neighbors. The domain officials arrive to collect the tax rice. They come with carts and scales, measuring out the required amount from each farmer. Takeshi presents his tax grain, which is weighed and loaded onto the carts. He receives a receipt, a small piece of paper confirming his payment. This receipt protects him from accusations of not paying his taxes. The tax collection is a somber occasion. 40% of the harvest is a heavy burden, and every farmer feels the weight of it. But the tax is inevitable, required, and non-negotiable. To refuse would bring severe punishment. So Takeshi pays without complaint, though in his heart he wishes he could keep more of what he grew. As autumn progresses toward winter, the rhythm of life slows. The days are shorter, the weather is cooler, there is less field work. The rice fields lie fallow, the stubble slowly decomposing into the soil. Some farmers plant a winter cover, crop barley or wheat, but Takeshi does not. His fields will rest through the winter, recovering their fertility for next year's rice. The stored rice, carefully kept in the raised granary, represents the family's food security. Takeshi calculates that with careful rationing, they have enough to last until next harvest, with a small surplus for emergencies. This is good. Some years are not so comfortable. Some years the yield is poor, and the family must be very careful with food, perhaps even going into debt to buy supplemental grain. But this year is a good year. The harvest was solid, the family is secure, and for this, Takeshi is grateful. He offers prayers at the village shrine, thanking the spirits for the successful harvest, praying for similar fortune next year. Winter settles over the village. Snow falls on the mountains, and cold winds blow from the north. The rice fields are frozen, the irrigation channels quiet. This is the season of rest, the quietest time in the farmer's year. Takeshi's work during winter is minimal compared to the other seasons. There are no crops to tend, no fields to water, no weeds to pull. The main tasks are household maintenance, craft work, and preparation for the spring that will eventually come. Many winter days are spent indoors. The house, though not luxurious, provides adequate shelter from the cold. A small hearth in the center of the main room burns charcoal, providing warmth. The family gathers around this hearth, working on various projects, talking quietly, sometimes simply sitting in comfortable silence. Takeshi makes and repairs tools during these winter months. He carves new hoe handles from hardwood, shapes them carefully with his knife, fits them to the metal blades. He makes new sickles, grinding and sharpening the metal until the edge is keen. He repairs baskets, reweave broken sections, reinforces weak spots. This work is meditative, like much of farm work. It requires attention and skill, but not intense concentration. His hands know what to do, and his mind can wander. He thinks about the past year, about the year to come, about his children's futures, about small matters and large ones. Yuki spends winter days spinning thread and weaving cloth. The family's clothing must be maintained and replaced as it wears out. She sits at her small loom, working the shuttle back and forth, building up the cloth thread by thread. The sound of the loom is rhythmic and peaceful, a background music to winter days. The boys have less to do in winter. They help with small chores, but mostly they have time to rest and play. They make snowmen when it snows. They practice calligraphy, learning the characters they will need to read and write. Takeshi, though not highly educated himself, values education and wants his sons to have opportunities he did not have. His mother spends her days near the hearth, staying warm, sometimes dozing, sometimes working on simple tasks like sorting beans or shelling nuts. She is in her 70s, which is quite old, and she tires easily. But she is still mentally sharp, and she tells stories to her grandsons, old tales passed down through generations, stories of spirits and heroes, of the village's history, of her own childhood. Winter is also a time for social activities. The village holds occasional gatherings where families come together to share food, tell stories, and enjoy companionship. These gatherings break up the monotony of winter and reinforce community bonds. And there are festivals. The New Year festival is particularly important, marking the transition from one year to the next. The village shrine is decorated, and families visit to pray for good fortune in the coming year. Special foods are prepared. New clothes are worn if the family can afford them. It is a time of renewal and hope. But mostly, winter is quiet. The days are short, the nights are long, the world outside is cold and stark. Inside, the family lives simply, conserving resources, waiting for spring to return. Takeshi sometimes walks his fields even in winter, just to check on them, even though there is nothing to see but frozen stubble and bare earth. These walks are more ritual than necessity. They maintain his connection to the land, remind him that the fields are still there, waiting for the cycle to begin again. He stands at the edge of a field, looking out over the empty expanse, and thinks about the year ahead. In a few months, he will be back here, preparing seed beds, transplanting seedlings, watching the rice grow. The cycle is eternal. It was here before he was born, and it will continue after he is gone. He is just one person, one farmer, one small part of something larger. This thought is comforting rather than diminishing. He is part of the land's rhythm, part of the village's continuity, part of the flow of seasons and generations. His work matters not because it is unique or special, but because it is necessary, and it is done faithfully. Winter will eventually end, spring will return, and when it does, Takeshi will be ready. As winter deepens toward its end, the first signs of coming spring begin to appear. The days, though still cold, grow slightly longer. The sun, low in the winter sky, begins its slow climb toward the spring equinox. In the mountains, the snow depth stabilizes, no longer deepening with each new storm. Takeshi notices these signs because he is attuned to them. A farmer must be. His livelihood depends on understanding the seasons, on sensing when winter is loosening its grip, when the time is approaching to begin preparations for the new rice-growing year. He checks his stored seed rice, ensuring it has remained dry and free from pests through the winter. He inventories his tools, noting what is ready and what needs final attention. He discusses plans with Yuki and his sons, assigning responsibilities for the coming season. And he thinks about the year ahead. Will it be a good year? Will the weather cooperate? Will the rice grow well? Will the harvest be abundant? These questions cannot be answered in advance. A farmer must accept uncertainty as part of life. But uncertainty does not mean helplessness. Through skill, experience, and hard work, a farmer can influence the outcome. By choosing good seed, preparing the soil properly, tending the rice carefully, by doing all the small things correctly, Takeshi gives himself the best chance of success. The rest is in the hands of heaven. The plum blossoms will bloom soon, the traditional sign that spring is beginning. When they do, Takeshi will know it is time to start preparing seed rice again, to begin the cycle once more. He is 45 years old now. He has been farming rice since he was a boy, learning from his father. He will continue farming until he is too old, and then his sons will take over. His older son, now 15, is already competent in all the major tasks. In a few years, he will be ready to manage his own fields. This continuity, this passing down of knowledge and responsibility from generation to generation, is how the village survives, how the rice keeps growing, how life continues. Takeshi knows that his life is not extraordinary. He is not a samurai or a merchant or a scholar. He is a farmer, one of thousands, one of millions across Japan. His name will not be remembered beyond a generation or two. He will leave no great works or lasting monuments. But he will leave something. He will leave his sons, who will farm after him. He will leave the fields, improved and maintained through his labor. He will leave the knowledge he has accumulated and shared. And he will leave rice, thousands and thousands of bowls of rice, grown through his hands, feeding people, sustaining life. This is enough. This is a good life, a purposeful life, a life connected to the earth and to the community, a life of honest work and simple dignity. As winter begins to fade and spring approaches once more, Takeshi feels ready. The cycle will continue. The rice will grow again. And he will be there, as he has always been, doing what he knows how to do, following the path that was laid before him by his ancestors, maintaining the tradition that will be passed to his children. This is the quiet life of a rice farmer in Edo period Japan. Not dramatic, not exciting, but meaningful in its own way. A life measured not in years but in harvests, not in achievements but in rice grown and children raised, not in fame but in the satisfaction of work done well. And so we leave Takeshi as late winter settles over his village, as he waits for spring to return, as he prepares for the cycle to begin once more. The fields lie quiet, but they are not empty. They hold the promise of the next planting, the next growing season, the next harvest. This is the rhythm of rice cultivation, unchanged for centuries. Spring preparation, summer tending, autumn harvest, winter rest. Over and over, year after year, generation after generation. The cycle is eternal. When you think of Japan, you might think of samurai, of temples, of bustling cities. But Japan was also perhaps primarily a nation of rice farmers. Millions of people like Takeshi, working the land, growing the rice that fed everyone else, living quiet lives that history rarely records, but which sustained the entire society. Their work was not glamorous, but it was essential. Their lives were not dramatic, but they were meaningful. And in their patient, seasonal labor, there is something we can learn about patience, about working with nature rather than against it, about accepting our place in larger cycles that began before us and will continue after us. So as you drift towards sleep, perhaps think of Takeshi in his field, transplanting rice seedlings in the warm water, watching the plants grow through summer, harvesting golden grain in autumn. Think of the seasons turning, the work repeating, the rice growing year after year. Let the rhythm of that cycle, steady and ancient and peaceful, carry you gently into rest. Good night.